welcome back to another confirmation lesson. This one is entitled Reveal. So many things are being revealed to us on a day-to-day basis as we learn things, as we take in information. We are learning more and more things are being revealed to us. There are big questions and then there are small questions. A lot of times during the course of my day, I ask myself the little questions. When am I going to eat next? When am I going to see my friends? Can I get in a game of golf this week? If I get to Chick-fil-A, am I going to do the spicy sandwich or just the original? These are important questions, but there's still bigger questions out there. And these are the sorts of things that we need to explore. Questions like, what's my biggest goal in life? When do I feel most alive? Can I describe the feeling of being loved? All of these sorts of questions are things that we need to strive to answer. Do you think that most people are satisfied? These are really tough questions to ask and even more difficult questions to answer. But there are answers that we have access to, that you and I have access to. And one of the biggest questions we can ask about the world, all of existence, is who did it? Does he exist? Does God exist? Is there somebody who's in charge of this plan, of this earth? Who is it and why? That's a really important question. And for almost all of humanity's history, all of civilization's time, people always answered with a resounding yes. God does exist. And then they would argue about who he was, who he wasn't, how many gods there were, but everybody believed that there was a God. When you look around at the universe, as I hear the dogs bark and there's people around me, that there must be a reason behind all of it. Yes, God exists, but can we say anything about it? A number of years ago in England, they did a research to find out if people actually believed that there was a God. And it was a 3-year-long study done in 20 different countries, and they finally decided that there absolutely had to be, that there was innate in human beings, that there was in fact a God, that human nature in fact understands when it looks to the stars that there must be a God that exists. There's something in us that recognizes that we're not the only ones here, that in fact God is present among us at all times. And sometimes we cloud that, but the Lord is constantly trying to break in and reveal himself to us. So what are some of the ways that he does that? The trouble with that question is that God, of course, is an immaterial being, which means that God is not made out of matter like me. God can't clap. He doesn't have a body. So what science does is measure physical things. You know, like I can take out a ruler and say, my hand is this tall, you know. But we can't measure God. We can't even see him. So does he exist? It's not a scientific question we're asking. It's actually a philosophical question. And we ask these sorts of things all the time. To ask if something is beautiful is a philosophical question. To ask what is love is not a scientific question. To ask what does it mean to be just and righteous to somebody, those aren't scientific questions, they're philosophical questions. But you and I both know that beauty exists, that love exists, that justice exists, and we can argue about what the definition of those things are, but you absolutely do know that they exist. And it's the same way when we're asking a question about God's existence. Is not a scientific question. It is absolutely a philosophical question. St. Thomas Aquinas was one of the most brilliant men to ever live. He was a saint who lived in the 1200s, and he explored these very important philosophical questions on the existence of God. They're known as the 5 proofs for the existence of God. And he goes through the proof from motion, the proof from contingency, the proof of teleology, which is whether or not there's a purpose for things, the argument from degree, and then, of course, the proof of causation. And what he's talking about in all of these proofs, as he's not just trying to prove the existence of God, but pointing out things that we perceive, things that we see in reality, and how they point back to God. So what he's saying at the end of each of these is not that this is what God is, but this is what we call God. So for example, the argument from motion, it maintains that if everything is in motion, if I'm here and I can move around, I'm not the one who caused me to be in motion, right? Of course, my parents caused me to be in motion, and then their parents caused them to be in motion, and then their grandparents and then we keep going back and back and back. So then we get to a point where there's nobody who could have caused it. Maybe it was an external force in the universe, but what caused that, right? So you can't have an infinite regress, an infinite, basically, chain of things that were moving. Something unmoved had to move it. So you can imagine if you pull up to train tracks and you just see these boxcars zooming by you, right? Zooming, zooming, zooming. You know that something has to be causing those boxcars to move. And you don't see it, but of course you have to know that it's real, that it does in fact exist. Pardon this lawnmower. Pardon the lawnmower. It does exist. I can't see it, but I hear it. And while Thomas Aquinas lived some 800 years ago, we still have people who are trying to think these things out, not scientifically, but philosophically. C.S. Lewis is one of those men. He's the one who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and he's asking these important questions. What C.S. Lewis notes is that all of us have thirsts, all of us have hungers, we have needs that we can satisfy here. If I'm hungry, I get food. If I'm thirsty, I get a drink. If I'm lonely, I can hang out with friends. There's all these things that we can satisfy here on earth. But C.S. Lewis also noted that there's some desires that just can't be satisfied here on earth. Nobody ever says, oh, I've had enough beauty in my life, or I've had enough love and joy and happiness in my life. There's something in us that craves for more. And what C.S. Lewis proposes is that there's something outside of this world that can satisfy this, but it's not here. C.S. Lewis writes, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Made for another world. That there's a hunger that can only be satisfied somewhere else. And this is what St. John Paul II was alluding to when he wrote, it is Jesus that you seek when you dream of happiness. It's Jesus whom you seek. Jesus alone can satisfy that desire for happiness. Nothing here on this earth can satisfy it. We need Him. So as we explore these deep questions, if God exists and how we can know that, it's not enough for us just to know that He exists. That even doesn't satisfy our hearts. That's not enough for us. It's not enough to know that God was the first mover, that God is the first cause of all things, that He's the last and the purpose for everything that exists. That's not enough. We want to know who He is. We want to know why He made us. We want to know His personality and everything like that. Who is this God? And that's where the word reveal becomes so important. God has revealed Himself to us. He stepped foot into our world. He spoke to Abraham. He spoke to Isaac and Jacob. He spoke to Joseph. He spoke to all of these famous men and women we see in the scriptures, trying to reveal Himself so that we could know Him. If I'm trying to get to know a friend, it's not enough for me to know that that person exists on the other side of the planet. I need to encounter him or her to get to know them, right? And God speaks to us through the scriptures, especially in our prayer to reveal himself. And in the book of the Hebrews, it says that in times past, God spoke to us in partial and in varied ways. That's like through Abraham and Moses and all these the prophets, to our ancestors through the prophets. In these last days, he spoke to us through a son, whom he made heir of all things, and through whom he created the universe. He is now speaking to us through a son. He sent his son to speak directly to us. Why did the son come? The son came, Jesus came to reveal the Father's love for us. Why do we exist? Because God loved us when he created us. He thought that we'd like being alive. He thought we'd like existence. He loves us and he wants us to spend our lives here on earth and in heaven with him. God wants us to be with him. Jesus tells us this time and again of the Father's love for us, that we should love one another. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He says, I want you to come to my Father through me. He shows us how much God loves us. So the invitation is revealed to us. But Jesus invites us to return love back to God. This God that loves us so much, will I accept the invitation? Will I love him in return? St. Augustine has one of the most famous lines regarding this. Lord, our hearts are restless until they rest in you. There's something in my heart, in my soul, that is restless without God. It's what C.S. Lewis said, that I am created for another world. I cannot be satisfied here on this earth. That God has better plans in store for me. And the amazing thing about God too, and you know this, is that he created you at a single moment, yes. But at every moment of your life, he's holding you in existence. He's loving you into existence. That if God stopped thinking about you, that if God stopped loving you, you would vanish, poof. But God is holding you in existence. Every breath that you take is supported by God. There's nothing that you do that is outside of his love for you. And even when we sin, even when we turn away, even when we're mean and rude and arrogant and everything else, prideful and mischievous, the Lord still loves us because we belong to him. He's not going to give up on us, but will we give up on him? He's revealed his love, but will you reveal your love in return for him?